Hey guys, Austin here. Welcome to the video. Today we're reading a book called The Idea Factory by John Gertner, not sure exactly how to say it. This book was not what I thought it was going to be. I'm always looking for ways to come up with better ideas, and because ideas are absolutely everything, as far at least ideas backed by execution um, are everything. And so I thought that when I was reading this book, I was going to learn how to come up with better ideas, and that's kind of why I read this book. This book is about something much deeper, and it's pretty advanced, and it's also very historical. So this book talks about the development of the telecommunication companies and how the telecommunication technology, aka talking on the phone, how that was developed, right? And they do that through something called the Bell Labs. It's like a scientific research company basically that came up with a lot of this technology. Talks about AT&T and the role that they played. It talks about how this was used in war and the development of America as a country. And so it's a very long book. So at a 2.25x reading speed, this book takes about 8 hours to read. So it's very long. And when I first got into reading the book, sometimes a lot of books are not worth reading. I'm not going to tell you that this one's not worth reading, but this one wasn't what I was expecting. And I kind of got a little bit into the book and I kind of realized it. So the first thing I wanted to share is, what do you do when you come across a book like this? Well, feel free to just, if it's a book that you don't think is going to bring you a whole lot of value, feel free to just pivot and move on to a different book. There are so many books that are out there. If you start reading one and you can just kind of get a gut feeling and tell that this probably isn't going to have a whole lot in it for you, I think moving on to another book is totally a fine thing to do. I think that you can always kind of find something from these books, and it's good to read a vast variety of books. This is a different type of book that I typically read. Now, the first thing is that there are these books. This book specifically is very story based. So it's talking about a timeline, it's talking about figures, it's talking about the historical events that occurred in this book. And I'm looking at a couple books on my bookshelf right now. I see The Hiltons. That's the story about Conrad Hilton. It's a big book. There's a book about Napoleon Bonaparte, and it's a really big book. It's probably got to be at least 800 pages and would take a long time to read. There are books like Total Recall, which is Arnold Schwarzenegger's autobiography. There's a book called The Snowball, or The Snowball, which is Warren Buffett's biography. He did not write that one. It was written by one of his assistants who was with him for a long time. The Snowball is a 24-hour long read. That's how long the book is. It's very, very long. Total Recall, I think, is 21 hours or 23 hours to read that through audiobook, just to kind of give you some perspective. So how do you read a book like that in a reasonable amount of time? Well, you listen to it at a much faster pace. And because these books are very story-based, they are very engaging. Some of these books, like this one right here, Outliers, this is not as much story-based as a book like The Hiltons. When the book is story-based, you can listen to them at a much faster pace because it's gonna naturally stick with you, and it's not quite as important for you to be, it's not quite as important for you to know every single microscopic detail. It just doesn't matter as much, right? And so when you're going through a book like that, feel free to listen to them at a much, much faster pace, because even if you feel like a minute or two went by where you weren't quite listening or you didn't catch all the details, you'll make up enough of the information on the next 1 to 2 minutes. And so that's how I listened to this book, just to kind of jam through it and get the idea of what was going on here. And so I do have a few notes that I'd like to go through here. Before I jump into the notes, I want to let you know why I make these videos. The reason why is because it helps me remember what I'm reading, and actually helps me digest it and lock it into my memory bank inside of my mind. Because a lot of times I've read books and I didn't go through and talk about them with anyone, and then maybe I didn't take notes, and therefore you start to kind of forget some of the information. So I just found that it's a great way that I can read one book per day. That's my goal, is to read one business book every single day, Monday through Friday, and then I make like a little video and I send out an email about it, which if you haven't joined my email list, I hope that you do. I'd love to have you join that. But aside from that, this really helps me remember this stuff. And so, and hopefully that I, can bring some information to the light from these books that I'm reading, and hopefully some of that information can help you go out and make a difference in your life as well too. So that's why I make these videos. I want to say thank you for being here. I appreciate your time. And so that's a little bit about the intro of the book. We kind of talked about that. I'll go through a couple of bullet points here that I have kind of prepared in advance for this video. And then at the very end of this, here in the next few minutes, I will tell you what my key takeaways are from a business perspective and how I think that they can apply to our life. So the book, and just to kind of summarize some of the things that are in the book explores the origins of modern communications through Bell Telephone Laboratories. So the development of the communication technology, aka how we talk on the phone. That's the type of stuff that was done inside of this book. It examines how and why innovation happens and who makes it happen. Basically, the type of environment that are happening when great breakthroughs occur, the quantity, the amount of people that are involved in these great big breakthroughs, and kind of what the timeline looks like for how long it takes to accomplish something on a massive scale. It highlights Bell Labs' contributions to the technological progress. Basically, they played a major role in how we communicate. This helped us with obviously developing the technology. They said in the book that they believed that the advancements of the technology that was being made by Bell Labs, right? That's the company or the scientific research lab that came up with a lot of these breakthroughs. They thought that these people were about 50 years ahead of their timeline because other people would have discovered these scientific breakthroughs, but they just didn't think that anyone else would discover some of this stuff for another 50 plus years. And so these people were just ahead of the time, which helped us move forward faster, which is something that we're all trying to do with our own personal lives, with our businesses and stuff like that. So yeah, so they made they had major contributions to our technological progress. It focused on key figures, so it wasn't just one person that was really highlighted in this book. I was recently reading Titan, which is the Rockefeller book, and obviously in that book it talks about other people too, but kind of the primary focus, I would say, is kind of on Rockefeller specifically. This book was not specifically about too many people, and if anything, it was about one person holding the baton, handing it off to the next person in a big race to get this whole thing done. And so some of the key figures that were talked about were Mervyn Kelly, Jim Fisk, William Shockley, Claude Shannon, John Pierce, and William Baker. And these are all people that I don't know anything about, and I do know a little bit more about each of them now from reading the book. But the thing that I kind of took away from that is that a lot of people played a major role in this big project, which was advancing the telecommunications company. And so another thing is that it describes Bell Labs as a pioneering institution for scientific research and development. They were ahead of the game, about 50 years, like I was saying. It also details the invention of the transistor and other technological breakthroughs, which is the technology that actually transmits the communication. And so they had lots of different things that they did. They had like the wires that are in the water for passing the communication through. They also had things like the satellites that were up in space for passing communication through as well too. So there's a lot of different things that were involved there. Now, my 3 big takeaways from this book, long term, this whole book was basically saying to accomplish anything big, it takes a long time. And we need to settle in and work on our projects for an extended period of time. This was a really good reminder for me personally because I a lot of times have a hard time. I might start a new business, I might start a new marketing campaign, I might start doing some prospecting, and what happens is I get a couple days into it, I get 3 weeks into it, 3 months into it, 3 years into it, and I start to get kind of tired and discouraged, and that's not what we want to do, right? We do not want to be, we do not want to get burnt out, and we don't want to give up. Just don't jump ship. I was actually just on a call a little bit ago, and there is no burnout in the dojo was kind of the saying for the call that I was on recently. And so we can't give in to the temptation of giving up. And so when we're going out there and we're doing anything, coming into it with a very long-term mindset, I think would benefit us all in a great way. So that's my first takeaway, is that, we need to be thinking long-term. My next takeaway is that the outliers theory is confirmed. And so this is the book Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. And in this book, it talks about how it doesn't just come down to talent or skill, it comes down to experiences or luck and timing. It comes down to things that are out of our control. And that was a big focus that was on this book, is like, hey, yeah, talent is important, work ethic is important, but also the way the cards unfold in front of a person plays a major role in them doing anything. And so in this book, as I was reading it, I was like thinking to myself, and it was kind of explained in the book that, a lot of things had to kind of fall into place for this whole thing to work out. And it's pretty crazy to think, because sometimes we need to be very aware of our experiences and what's happening around us, because sometimes doors are going to open up, and if we're not if we're not looking out for what's happening in our environment around us, we're going to be missing opportunities. And so just maybe a word of encouragement is to keep your eyes open for things that are happening around you, so that you can capitalize on them when doors do open that you were not expecting, or maybe you weren't even aware that were opening in front of you. So that's the second one. The first one is to think long term. The second one is that the outliers theory was confirmed in the book. And then the last one here is to be ready for things to change and then adapt. There were lots of times where research and scientific stuff had to just get thrown in the garbage completely, because they had a different technological or scientific breakthrough, which basically made all of the work that they were doing completely irrelevant. And instead of just staying hung on to the research that they had been working on, they just had to get rid of it and adapt. And so when we're doing anything, especially over a long period of time, there are going to be things that change. We've had artificial intelligence come into the game recently in the last year or two or whatever. That's a big change. And we can ignore it, or we can accept it and adapt to it and implement it in the way that we need to in our lives and in our business. This is far from the last thing that's going to change in our life and in our environment. I think it's a good idea for us to keep our eyes open, watch for the things that are going to change, and then adapt with the markets as they do change. So guys, the book is called The Idea Factory. I want to say thank you for watching this video, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next one.